So in this lecture, we're going to be talking about media planning. And our objectives for this lecture is to really explain how to develop a media plan, to look at the purposes of media objectives, and how to develop and implement media strategies. Bells and Bells define the media plan as a written document that summarizes objectives and strategies that guide how media dollars will be spent. So what you need to take from this definition is the first thing is that um, it will guide how media is selected for the campaign, and the entire thought process behind a media plan is to really, based on objectives, um, really determine what combination of media are going to be best for um, most effective communication of the message for the campaign. Um, that also, in terms of placements, are going to reach the largest number of potential customers, and not just you know any persons, but persons within your target audience at the lowest cost. And that doesn't mean selecting the media that are cheapest. It means being cost efficient in your selection. So you are reaching large numbers of your target audience at the same time. So that's what we mean to talk about cost effectiveness there. The key questions that media plans are designed to answer include who to target, what is the objective, what media vehicles we should be using, where, during what time frame, um, how the funds or weights are attributed to the media, meaning the level of importance that we place on each, because that is going to determine budget, and of course, cost. How much money will we spend, and uh, what proportion of our spend will go to what media. Now, one of the big challenges with media planning is really to manage all the available opportunities while maximizing the budget. Because, like we talked about, like I just said previously, being cost effective means and being efficient means maximizing on your dollars while really capturing the optimal opportunities to reach your target audience. So, all of this decision making is going to come together in the media plan, and at the end of the day, what we are engaged in when we are in the business of media planning and IMC is really connection planning. So yes, it's media planning, but it's more connection planning, because as brand stewards, um, if we're on the brand side, we're working with the media planners to connect brands to consumers' interests and lives. So at the end of the day, that's what the message is about. That's what the placement is about. How can we, develop a brand message that will resonate, that shows how the brand aligns with consumers' interests and fits into their lives. And so the goal here is to maximize message impact while minimizing cost. Now, in terms of challenges that we face when we are um, engaged in media planning, it really becomes very difficult, and sometimes the process of media planning can um, be ineffective when we don't have enough information about the markets that we are trying to compete in, or the media that we are going to be using. So, for example, unavailability of measurement information about the usage and who uses what. Um, or if the information is too costly to obtain, then that becomes an issue. Also, you find that there is also inconsistent terminology, meaning different persons, different parties define key terms the differently, and as a result of that, there can be inconsistency in the measurement, and there is no standard measure of certain things. And if there is no standard measure, then the numbers that are being presented by different parties actually mean different things. So, for example, sweeps periods um, are used to to measure target audiences and set rates. And what happens is that instead of measuring consistently every single day usage and ratings, what tends to happen is that it is done in different time periods. So those are the sweep periods. So during those sweeps periods is when they pretty much take a snapshot, right, of the audiences and the numbers, and they utilize that to say, okay, this is a general measure. So even for that, what are the sweeps periods? If different persons are using different sweeps periods, then it's going to be an issue, right? Um, you also have time pressures, because again, when you talk about trying to compete in a very um, active and highly competitive environment, it means that sometimes the turnarounds that we're looking for our campaigns are very brief, and so there might not be sufficient time to do the proper planning and analysis as we are putting these plans together, right? And in terms of even effectiveness, we in many instances are merely estimating or utilizing estimates to measure effectiveness. And so this can cause measurement problems because you can't measure actual behavior. And this is one of the reasons why, for example, digital has been so attractive to companies, because you don't have to estimate, for example, audience that viewed an ad. You can know for sure based on the tracking that comes embedded whenever you put content online. Now, in terms of the media plan, there are 4 steps that we recommend in terms of developing the media plan. The first step is to do the market analysis and identify the target market. Then we establish our media objectives. Then we develop our media strategy, implement it, and then we do our evaluation and follow up. And I will talk about each of these steps. So in terms of market analysis and target market identification, we are really focusing on the questions that of who are we going to advertise to, right? And that's a very important decision to be made, because at the end of the day, we have to know who we are targeting in order to select media vehicles that are um, best matched to that target audience, but also are compatible with the creative executions that whether whether we are or agencies are thinking about. So being more focused on who the target audience is, having a clear definition of the target audience, is going to make it more easy to find the media that is correct for delivering the message that is relevant to that target audience. Now, one of the things that one of the things that organizations do in order to help to really um, analyze the potential of a market is to determine the index number, and it's a part of the target market identification process, right? So what we do here is to look at, for example, um, the index number, and to calculate it, as you can see, you look at the percentage of users in a demographic segment, you look at the percentage of the population in that same segment, you multiply that by 100. Now, this this index number is tends to be generally a good indicator of market potential, and in fact, um, planners are normally, in many instances, more concerned with the percentages and the index number than they are look at with looking at, for example, raw numbers in terms of trying to deal with or to determine marketing potential. And this is because percentages and index numbers put raw numbers into context. So, for example, when somebody says that a company, say for example, say a company has a subscriber base of 1 million subscribers, you might think, oh, that's a large number. But if it is that the population is 350 million, right? Or even the potential target audience is 100 million, then that 1 million now, when um calculated as a percentage of total target audience, or even or even if you estimate, if you calculate the index number, then you see the issue right there, because again, while 1 million might sound large, when you put it into context, it might seem extremely small. And so that is really the important thing here. So here, when we look at index numbers, we want to say that what we have to understand is that an index number that is um, greater, when we calculate our index number, an index number that is greater than 100 means that the use of the product is greater than the segment in one that is average, which is 100, or less than 100. And let's see what that. Let's look at this index number calculator. So this slide shows that you have here, um, for a potential product, there is here in the 18 to 24 age group, 15.1% of the population is in that particular market segment, and the product use in that segment is 18%. So on the previous slide we said what? When the use is greater than the size, that's how you get the index numbers that are over 100. So here, because population in segment, product use in segment, this number goes over this number, multiplied by 100 gives you the 119, right? So here, if you look at this, you see 18 to 24 age group, yeah, 51.1% of that population is in that segment. 25 to 34% age group, 25.1% of the population is in that segment. 35.44%, 35 to 44 age group, 20.6% of the population is in that segment, and 45 plus age group, 39.3% of the population is in that segment, right? One of the things, so you look at these index numbers high, so these two numbers are over 100. This number is 100. This number is 91. All right. However, high indexes, which are normally desirable, um, can be misleading because it might be as a result of a low denominator. So for example, in this slide, you have 18 to 24-year-old segment having the highest index, but it also has both the lowest product usage and the lowest population percentage. So if we were looking just on the index, we would be focusing on just here 15.1% of the population and only 18% of product users, which means there's a full 82% of product users that are outside there. So look at here, for example, you'll notice that 36% of product users are in the 45 plus age group. 25% of product users are in the 25 to 34 age group. 21% of product users are in the 35 to 44 age group, right? And when you look at the size of that group in terms of percentage of the population, here you notice as well that not only is the 45 plus the largest proportion of product users, but it's also the largest proportion of the population that falls into this segment. So you can't just look at the index numbers when you are saying, okay, yes, high index numbers normally indicate strong market potential, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you understand what the percentages look like, because again, sometimes the indices can be high, but that's because the percentages themselves were low, and it's math. When you work the fraction, you're going to get a big number, right? When we are engaging in the market analysis, we also want to do the market analysis part. We just talked about the target market identification. But we want to look at the internal and external factors. So our internal factors that we want to consider include size of the media budget, our internal capabilities, the organization of our advertising agencies. We also want to look at external factors including the economy, changes in technology, and competitive factors, which is one of the reasons why we normally encourage students when they are engaging in media planning to do the internal and external analysis. Look at our SWOT, look at our PESTLE, look at our Porter's five forces, because those are actually important in terms of determining um, what real opportunities exist and what opportunities exist that we actually can realistically take advantage of given our resource constraints, talent, time, etc. Other things that we want to consider, the other question that we want to consider is where to promote. So when we talk about that, we can use indices here again. So for example, we can use the survey of buying power index that charts the potential of any particular area relative to the country as a whole, which gives media planners insight into the relative dollar value of a market. So when you think about, for example, where to put a nice upscale gym, um, you know, or where to focus the messaging for a nice upscale gym. When you're dealing with larger communities, right, larger countries, larger than in Jamaica, where it's not like in Jamaica, where if you're going to advertise on TV, you're going to pretty much reach everybody in the island, whether or not um, the, 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 the location um, restricts persons from outside. So let's think about, for example, Kemlani Mart, which is located up in Manor Park, right? The truth is, Kemlani Mart advertises on national TV in Jamaica. However, you are unlikely to find persons from Westmoreland, St. James, who are going to travel to Kingston to shop in Kemlani Mart, right? However, if it was a country like the US, right, where you have big states like California, where you would look at Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Francisco, and those places. So and those different cities are significantly further apart, right? So in terms of advertising, and they also have local media. So we have the DMAs, the designated market areas. We have talked about that previously. And because you have separate DMAs, you would want to choose what DMAs you're advertising in, right? Because again, where are the people that fall into my target audience? So for example, you'll find that in terms of luxury products and so on, you'll get a lot more advertising in, for example, Los Angeles, because the rich and famous tend to live in LA, right? And so they would choose to advertise there as opposed to San Bernardino, California, right? So that helps when you look at buying power in different places to say, you know, this is where I want to be focusing my message because there's a high concentration of the people who would fall into my target audience in that area. We see that here, we see that in Jamaica locally and also in other parts of the Caribbean when it comes to things like outdoor advertising, right? We would choose to do our outdoor advertising for particular products and services in those areas where we have a high concentration of the people that are going to fall into our target audience. Now, another or two indices that I find very useful are the brand development index and the category development index. Now, the brand development index factors the rate of product usage by geographic area into the decision process, whereas the Category Development Index provides information on the potential for development of the total product category and not necessarily specific brands. So let's look back at them um, more closely. Now, the Category Development Index looks at percentage of product category sales over percentage of total population in that particular locale, right? Whereas that was the Category Development Index. The Brand Development Index puts the percentage of total brand sales in that area over the percentage of the total population in that area. So as you can imagine, here with the CDI, I was trying to get the laser pointer. What the laser pointer is, right? I don't know what's going on. My cursor is not working. All right, but let's try it nonetheless. So here, the Category Development Index shows for the product category as a whole, right? What percentage of the product category is being sold in that area, and compare that to the percentage of the total population in that area. So say for example, you let's use rum for example. You want to look at potential for growing rum in a particular area. What you're going to look at is the percentage of not just your brand, but rum sales as a whole, rum sales nationwide. What percentage of rum sales occur in a particular area? And then you compare that to what percentage of the total population live in that area. And that tells you whether or not there is high potential for the category to grow. Because here's the thing, if there is potential for the category to grow, there is potential for your brand to grow, unless there is something wrong with your brand as opposed to other brands. And what tends to happen is that truth is, wherever there is potential for your brand to grow, there is potential for any competing brand in your product category to grow as well. Whereas a BDI is going to look at how your brand is growing. So for example, if you look and you notice based on this that your brand is not growing, but the category itself is growing, then you need to examine your product, examine your campaign to see what is wrong, because other brands are selling, yours is not. That's what that's what the BDI, when you put the BDI and the CDI together, the two of them work together to help you to interpret the market potential. So here is what I was referring to. When you have high BDI, meaning your brand development index, your brand is selling in terms of percentage of sales, your brand is doing well. There you have high market share, and high category development index says that there is good market potential because the category is growing as well. If you have high market share but the category itself is not growing, then you might want to look out for a decline in sales because the category as a whole has not grown, which means that chances are it will go into decline. If you have, if like I said, if there is low BDI but high CDI, right, then you see that your brand is not doing well even though the product category has high potential. So that means you need to try to figure out what exactly is going on, like what is wrong. When there is low BDI and low CDI, then the brand is not doing well, but the category is also not doing well. So it's not likely to be a good place for advertising. Now, the next step is in the process is to establish our objectives. We would want to conduct our media situation analysis, as I would have talked about. That should help us to determine specific media objectives. And our media objectives here define as what a company wants to accomplish regarding the delivery of its brand messages and their impact on the target audience. The media objectives are not the end, they are really designed to help you to actually achieve your communications and marketing objectives. So they are your goals for your media program. And something to be clear here, media objectives should be limited to those that can be accomplished through media strategies. So don't go now and outline sales objectives, for example, because can you achieve those through your media strategies? So these are some of the criteria that we must consider during the development of our media plans. As media planners, we must develop and implement media strategies that evolve directly from the actions required to meet the objectives that um, we had originally put out or really determine. And so we have to consider the media mix, target market coverage that we want, or geographic coverage that we want, or scheduling options, reach and frequency, recency objectives as well, the creative aspects, mood, flexibility, as well as budget considerations. So we wanted to look at, because all of these things are part of how we place the message, where we place the message, how frequently we place the message, in what specific media and vehicles we place the message. So some of the media objectives tend to focus on, for example, exposure. Um, this is where all media effects begin, because at the end of the day, first persons must be exposed to your message in order to have an opportunity to attend, to recall, to develop attitudes, to move on to behavior, etc. Circulation in the print world focuses on number of copies sold. Um, Impressions also is important, or are important, and we consider impressions to be the one person's opportunity to be exposed one time to an ad in a specific vehicle. That's an impression. Now, gross impressions um, is an estimate of total impressions across the publication's total circulation. Ratings converts this gross impressions to a percentage of household, and then share refers to the percent of viewers based on the number of TV sets or radios that are turned on. We talk about share of listening audience, right? Now, reach and frequency are really important terminologies that tend to come up in media planning. Now, reach is the percentage of all of the media audience that is exposed to at least uh, one um, one time to the advertiser's message during a particular time frame. So again, reach is a percentage of the media audience exposed at least once to the advertiser's message during a specific time frame. Frequency, on the other hand, is the number of times a person is exposed to an advertisement. So you have to see or hear an ad at least 3 times for it to make an impact. So in terms of trying to have recognition, recall, um, attitude formation, trying to get the brand into person's evoked set, you need frequency. So not just reach in terms of exposure once, but repeated exposure. And there are theories that speak to what is the optimal frequency that is required in order to achieve attitude change, or to form lasting impressions, right? The goal of a media plan really is to reach as many people in the target audience as often as the budget allows. Now, when we are choosing media, we normally take into consideration the intrusiveness of a medium, right? Um, because you want to catch attention, and because there's always so much clutter, and clutter we define as having a large number of advertising messages um, happening at the same time. But there's also internal clutter as well, because persons have their internal thoughts and processes that are going on even as they are watching TV. And so that you want your advertising, your message to break through that clutter. And so because of that, you tend to want to consider the intrusiveness, how disruptive is the medium that you're using. Now, you find that the more intrusive media are more costly to use. However, you have to balance that, um, or temper that intrusiveness, because if a message is too disruptive, intrusive, or irritating, then instead of building a positive brand relationship, you tend to find that persons get irritated, and you have the opposite effect. Instead of positive attitudes, we get negative attitudes as a result. Now, as I said, reach and frequency are two of the important terminologies that will come up in media objective setting. And reach is the percentage of different persons exposed to the message. Um, we have targeted reach, which is the percentage of a vehicle's audience that matches the brand's target market. And then you have a wasted reach, which is the number of people in the vehicle's audience who are neither customers nor prospects. So you have wasted reach. And that, of course, is important to note that it's not every single person who watches a particular TV show or even TV station are going to be part of the target audience, which is why planning is important, because in order to be laser focused, you want to thread the needle properly. You want to identify the medium that is most effective at reaching the optimal number of your target audience. You want to reduce as much wasted reach as possible. Now, our frequency objectives refers to the repetition of message exposure, and planners often use a frequency distribution model that shows the percentage of audience reached at each level of repetition. And what we tend to do is to do a frequency quintile distribution analysis that really divides the audience into five groups, each containing 20% of the audience. Now, as I would have mentioned before, there is a level of frequency that is optimal. And this is where we're talking about effective frequency, where you add frequency to reach until you get to the level where people respond. And um, when we talk about media waste, we now are talking about, again, um, expending resources, um, more money, meaning increasing the media weight, how much frequency we are having on a particular medium or in a particular vehicle. Um, Waste occurs when adding that additional weight actually no longer increases response, then that is waste that is being produced. When you write media objectives, you want to make sure that they are measurable with time frames. Um, I normally advocate for SMART objectives. Um, Again, there is no, I don't know that the medium has been created yet that will allow you to reach 100% of your target audience. And sometimes you can even sacrifice reach for frequency. That's why certain media are recommended when you have a frequency objective in terms of media that people spend a lot of time on, and so there are great opportunities for repeated exposure to your message. So we would be getting our frequency objective achieved here. As I would have said, we normally in the planning process we are developing a mix of media, because at the end of the day, how we mix the various types of media um, helps will determine the impact that we have, right? So creating a mix of media and you leveraging a mix of media in our planning, and it is going to add more versatility to the media strategy. It will increase both coverage and reach as well as frequency levels, and it improves likelihood of achieving our overall communication and marketing goals. Now, as I said before, that variety of targeted media vehicles are called our media mix, and this is what most organizations use because again, the media mix is going to distribute the message more widely um, because different media have different audience profile. So questions that you have to ask yourself as you are developing your media mix is what media will deliver what effects, and then can I reinforce and extend those effects with a mix of media? So you can actually double down, meaning um, try to cement a particular message by utilizing multiple media, making sure that you're reinforcing or even extending the effects um, by employing a combination or mix of media. Now, in terms of target market coverage, um, we say that a media has good coverage when it um, coverage of the target market when a high proportion or percentage of the users of that medium are in your target audience. So you want to make sure that you're matching the most appropriate media to the market based on their unique characteristics. And your goal here is to extend media coverage to members of the target audience while minimizing waste coverage. Again, waste coverage, media coverage that reaches people who are not potential buyers or users of your product. So highest concentration of your target audience is going to be good in terms of coverage, because that's what we define coverage as. So here are the marketing coverage possibilities. And as we see here, um, on the extreme left, this is the entire population excluding target market, which is blue. Then you have the target market, which is in yellow. The media coverage, which is in the light blue or teal if you want. And the media overexposure is going to be the garnet or burgundy. So notice here that when you have when you have when you have the where media coverage is exactly the same as your target market, you have full market coverage. This is the second um, diagram from the left. That is a full market coverage. Partial market coverage is when only some of the target market is being reached by the media, the medium selected, and then you have media overexposure or waste coverage, that burgundy area, which is where now the media coverage exceeds the target market. Now, in terms of um, media strategies for coverage, you can have strategies that are focused on geography. So, for example, when you're focusing on DMAs where product is available or products projected sales are high, then you would use a heavy up schedule. So again, more frequency here. Where and here you would use the CDI to help you in terms of rate of consumption, because remember we talked about the CDI looking at how the category is doing. Um, the BDI tells you how strong your brand is in particular geographical area. So the CDI tells you where the category is strong and weak, and the BDI tells you where your brand is strong and weak. Now, in terms of when to advertise, you want to consider seasonalities, holidays, days of the week, time of day. Time of day is particularly important, especially in the digital space. You will find that um, there are actually optimal times of day to release content or to advertise on particular social media platforms based on the profile of the users, where they are in their day, um, because we have a lot of multi-screen usage as well. However, in terms of level of attention, you find that level of attention varies, and the level of multi-screen usage varies throughout the day. You want to also consider how long in terms of the advertising campaign period. When you have campaign period that's too short, then the message may not have sufficient impact. Whereas when it's too long, you will find that you will suffer from, or the ads may suffer from wear out. You also want to consider how often to advertise over the campaign period. So this is now um, whether or not you're going to do with a more continuous strategy or a different strategy. So a continuous strategy really spreads the ads evenly over the campaign period, which again means that you would probably engage in a lot more spend, which many smaller advertisers don't have the resources to do, right? Now, um, more along the lines of timing is when we talk about timing, we can't talk about timing without discussing scheduling, which is really timing promotional efforts such that they coincide with the highest potential buying times. So, the primary objective of media scheduling is to time advertising efforts so that they will coincide with the highest potential buying periods, right? There are really three scheduling methods that are available to the media planner. We have the continuity method, which is where a continuous pattern of advertising is, takes place every day, every week, or every month. So here there are no gaps, no non-advertising period. Then you have the flighting method, which is where there are intermittent periods of advertising and no advertising. So you advertise and then you stop and then you go again. So you have a schedule, but there are periods where there are gaps where nothing is taking place. Then you have the pulsing strategy, which is a combination of continuity and flighting. So continuity is maintained, but there are certain periods where you tick up the advertising. So you'll find that um, advertisers like Quartz, uh, Grace, those the banks tend to advertise continuously. However, when they have something major happening, a major promotion or something, you'll find that the advertisement ticks up. Around the holidays, when there are special promotions, special deals, then the advertising ticks up. That is what pulsing. So something is happening all the time. They have their regular advertising going on, but it bumps up at different periods and then comes back down. So in terms of um, scheduling, one of the considerations here is aperture, which is really defined as um, placing messaging when consumers are most receptive to that brand message. And that's our goal, to reach the right people at the right time with the right message. Um, so, for example, here, and I'm unable to see the ad clearly. This is um, this space is taking reservations for October, which is close to the end of the regular season, I believe. So here they are doing some advanced planning, right, to make sure that um, and I believe this is a restaurant. Yes, Bertucci's. Yeah, it's a restaurant. And so what they're doing is look at the O in the October. What is this? This is a baseball. Um, so they are taking um reservations for during the season, right? Which means that the persons who are coming to the game are going to be able to make reservations, to be able to have dinner, whether they have come to watch the game in the stadium, and then they are able to go out and eat, right? So this is what we're talking about. So you know that the persons who they are advertising to very clearly here are the baseball fans, for example, because that is a baseball, I do believe. And they are specifying what time period they are taking reservations for, which is when the season is heating up. Now, here, three methods of promotional scheduling. This is how we would diagram the continuity flighting and pulsing method. So you notice the straight line, the line with the gaps, and then you have the pulse. So consistency going up, there is a bump up, then it goes back down to where it was, and then it bumps up again. So that would be the continuity schedule. And here, this figure outlines the advantages and disadvantages of each of the methods. I would strongly recommend that you take a look at these. Now, in terms of the message itself, um, we have to consider how much, how long the message needs to be, um, as well as um, its appropriateness for a particular medium. Because depending on the medium that you're using, you are going to find that um, certain message, certain executions, or certain formats are needed for that medium. So let's look at TikTok, for example. TikToks tend to be very brief, right? Um, that would be different than a reel on Instagram, right? And won't age myself, but I still am not a TikTok subscriber. I mean, I should sign up, but I'm sorry, I don't have the time just yet. I'm trying to get there mentally first before I can actually sign up for a TikTok. But your advertising objectives will help to determine what um, type of creative execution you need, how long it needs to be, how big it needs to be. But the platform or the medium is also going to determine that as well. Because especially when we talk about digital and even in advertising, I've noticed that, for example, on YouTube now, when you're doing digital ads on YouTube, there are different lengths that your ads can be. And um, you have the ads that are traditional length, and because of that, persons might have the opportunity to skip within after the first 10 or 15 seconds, right? You can choose to skip. I've noticed in recent times that a new ad format is being presented on YouTube where the ad itself is 5 or 10 seconds long, which means it is so quick that before the person gets annoyed and wants to skip, the ad is finished. And so when you think about where you are advertising, you want to think about what can be accommodated there and what is going to be ideal for your target audience, because even though you can put up a 30-minute ad on YouTube, I don't I'm not quite sure which product or brand we could be advertising that we would our target audience would be good with a 30-second ad or 30 minutes ad placement. And most of the times it's like documentaries and film, independently produced film and stuff like that that you see that are placed for such long time. Now, in terms of the media weighting, as I said, how much budget are we going to be spending in each particular area and also for each target group? So in large, and this is of course in um larger countries. However, in our local context, you'll find that we would weight or spend based on particular media vehicles. We would weight or spend, so we would weight or spend first based on um, the specific media we want to use. So we would put the relative weight there. So even in the overall IMC campaign, you might decide that, okay, advertising is going to get X% of the budget. Sales promotion will get Y% of the budget. Support media will get, so and so percent. And then we say, okay, when we look at advertising, we have TV, we have radio, we have print, we have magazine, we have digital. We have to wait there as well. What is going to be most important to campaign? And then, and of course, and then you organize or rank, and then you would determine the budget that goes to each of those, and you would select your vehicles, and then which vehicles get the greatest spend. So in looking back at some media audits, you will notice, for example, that persons might identify that most of the TV advertising dollars were spent on one particular TV channel, and so you would assume there that the weight that was one put on television advertising was a greater weight in terms of the overall percentage of resources that were going to be expended there. And then even within advertising, you would understand that a great weight was placed on TV advertising, and a great weight was placed on a particular media vehicle, meaning a particular TV station, right? Now this figure looks at, again, the reach and frequency objectives and understanding in terms of when we are placing messages, why it is good um, to really balance both reach and frequency. So in figure A, you have where one single TV program would is likely to reach about half of the audience. And this is just a theoretical scenario. When we have two TV programs, um, so you're advertising on two different shows, whether it's under the same station or on two different stations, you are likely to have an increase in the total market audience reach. Yes, there is some duplicated reach, which is a green segment in figure B, which is isolated in figure C. But pull out that duplicated reach and look at the unduplicated reach there. So, which is again much greater than figure A, right? So this is why, for example, we don't put all our eggs in one single basket, right? We don't necessarily focus just on advertising during one program. So, for example, in Jamaica, the prime time news is a prime spot. And a lot of organizations want to advertise during prime time news, but it is likely that you can increase your reach by advertising in prime time news and during some other program, right? Now, um, you have to make sure that you understand both, duplicated as well as unduplicated reach, right? Because unduplicated reach is really talking about all of your potential new exposures. But not only are you able to get the potential new exposures, but in terms of your duplicated reach here, you're looking at your frequency, persons who have seen your message more than one time. Um, so, as I would have said before, a lot of times advertisers have to make trade-offs between reach and frequency because we don't have unlimited funds. So you have to really determine whether or not you want your message to be seen and heard by um, more people or by fewer people more frequently. So we would have talked about ratings points, right? And this is a very important terminology in the broadcast industry because a program rating measures the potential reach in the broadcast industry. Now, when we talk about we are able to, we talk about ratings, one of the things that we can do is to measure our gross rating points, which is literally multiplying each media vehicle's rating by the number of insertions, so reach, multiplied by frequency, and then adding up the total of all vehicles in order to get your GRP. So reach multiplied by frequency for each, and then add them up. We also can calculate our target rating points, which adjust the gross rating points calculation so that it more accurately reflects the percentage of the target audience watching the program, thus reducing waste coverage. Because TRPs, or target rating points, look at the number of persons in the primary target audience that the media buyer will reach and the number of times. And this particular estimate does not include waste coverage. Now, effective reach represents a percentage of audience reach at each effective frequency increment. So based on the assumption that one exposure to an ad may not be enough to convey the desired message, we would want to ascertain what is the optimal frequency level. So what percentage of audience we reach with at least with each repeat, with each additional exposure. So this is a graph of effective reach. And so when we look at this, 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 this graph, you'll notice here that you are looking at a primetime TV schedule. And so the total exposure is 400 gross rating points here, whereas effective exposure is effective rating points, 221 ERPs. So look at this now in terms of percentage of reach. And you'll notice here that as the number of exposures increase, right, you get into the effective exposure range. Now, note here, however, that again, instead of focusing on increasing the number of media or exposures, new persons, you see here that they are focusing on number of exposures to achieve that effective reach. But there's a point beyond which it no longer makes sense. So you have no exposure, ineffective exposure, the threshold of effectiveness. When you start getting to effectiveness, let's say at least 3 times, 3 exposures, and you then are in the reinforcement zone between 3 and about 9. When you get to about 10 exposures, you are now in the space of excessive exposure or overexposure, and there is no guarantee of effective communication, right, in this excessive exposure space. But when you get to the part where is um, negative exposure, you are in a completely different scenario here, because now you are likely, number one, persons are overexposed, so we talk about message wear out, and you might even have the opposite effect happening, where persons now are not developing positive attitudes but negative attitudes, right? Um, Something to note here is that recent literature suggests that in the current environment where consumers are exposed to thousands of daily messages, effective reach may now require a minimum of 12 messages. Something else to consider is that the complexity of the message length, and the recency of the exposure can also have an impact on effective reach as well. Now, when we are trying to determine the optimal frequency levels for our campaign, we would want to look at um, marketing factors, message or creative factors, as well as media factors. So, for example, new brands would require higher frequency. Um, Brands that have strong loyal customer base would require less frequency. Brands that have higher share of the market requires less frequency. Products that need to be replaced frequently require higher frequency to maintain top of mind awareness. When strong competition exists, then higher frequency is required in order to achieve higher or optimal share of voice. Products with shorter purchasing cycles require high frequency to maintain top of mind awareness. Um, the ability to learn and retain messages also has an impact on frequency, which is the target group. If they have a high ability to learn and maintain messages, it has a high impact on the frequency. Now, in terms of message factors, simpler messages require less frequency. The more unique the message, the less frequency is required. Um, Newer campaigns also require higher frequency. Um, if you are trying to create an image, then you require a higher frequency. A single message also requires less frequency, but something to note is that higher frequency leads to faster wear out, and larger units require less frequency. In terms of media factors, um, more clutter requires higher frequency to break through it. Media that allow for more repeat exposure require less frequency. The more consistent the ad is with the editorial environment, the less frequency is required. The fewer the media, the lower the frequency required. The higher the level of attention achieved by the media, the less frequency required. And continuous scheduling also requires less frequency. Now, one of the things that we we can also plan for is um, recency. And here we would be focusing on short interval reach at minimum frequency levels as close to the purchase decisions as possible. So here, rather than focusing on, for example, a 4-week planning period for each, then recency planning really calls for a continuous schedule over, say, a 1-week period, and less targeting to gain exposure to reach as many potential customers as possible. So what you do, for example, instead of advertising far out, you focus on closer to the time that the purchase is going to be made. So think, for example, about products like Easter Bun and so on, where you find that the companies tend not to advertise too far away from the holiday. Majority of the spend is focused in that week, right, leading up to that holiday, right? So this is now the recent planning in effect. Now, in developing a media strategy, as marketers, we must consider both creativity and mood factors because it is possible to increase the success of a product significantly through a strong creative campaign. So certain media enhance the creativity of a message because they create a mood that carry over to the communication. So you want to make sure that we are really considering here um, how the message is being executed, what media is most appropriate for enhancing the creativity and best communicating that creative vision that should be tied to the message and should be highly appropriate for the time. Now, even though we understand the importance of advanced planning, we also have to understand that media strategy and effective media strategy does require some amount of flexibility. The market environment is one that changes quite rapidly, and so there has to be some level of agility that allows strategies to be modified. So flexibility would be needed in order to address the market opportunities. So, for example, development of a new advertising medium that may offer an opportunity that was not previously available. Threats, so internal or external factors may pose a threat to the firm, and so a change in media strategy is necessary. So, you would have to have flexibility in order to be able to really respond to those, right? Um, Availability of media. Alternative vehicles or media must be considered as a desired medium or vehicle is not always available to the marketer. So again, even when we talk about buying TV time and so on, you might find that sometimes, even though you would like to advertise in primetime news, there may be no spots available for the next 3 months. What are you going to do, right? Um, Also, you want to consider any changes in the medium or a particular vehicle that may require a change in your media strategy, meaning to use or not to use a particular medium. Because what if ratings fall steeply? Um, there is a shift. Then you might want to make sure that you are making some changes to your strategy in order to counteract those changes or make sure that your strategy is responsive. Now, I will talk about programmatic buying later on, but there, the, the introduction of media software has helped in terms of optimization because what it does is really enable us to determine the relative impact of a media mix on product sales and to optimize efficiency. But here, what you're trying to do in terms of, you know, optimizing efficiency, you also have to make sure that you are balanced because you have to be careful not to overload and to irritate consumers. So, as we talked about, that the effective frequency levels or effective reach, there is a area, there is a point at which it's overexposure, and when you get into negative exposure, that's when you're talking about persons who are overloaded or irritated because that will result in negative attitudes being formed. You cannot put a media plan together without considering the budget because again, that is what is going to determine, you know, whether or not the plan that we have is feasible. So we would, when we are choosing media, we have to consider the absolute cost of the media, which is the actual total cost required to place the message in that particular medium. And we also want to consider the relative cost, which is the relationship between the price paid for the advertising time or space and the size of the audience delivered. And that is normally used to compare media vehicles. So it is one of the reasons why, for example, even though people will talk about, traditional advertising, you find that um, traditional advertising, especially like TV, tends to be, um, again, in terms of relative cost, the price that you pay compared to the size of the audience that is being delivered, it tends to have some of the lowest costs compared to other media. And you'll notice when you read about the advantages of advertising, that will come up. TV advertising. So something to note here is that, as I would have said before, money is a very important consideration, and many advertising decisions often come down to cash. Um, so when we are using the we use the different measures like CPM, TCPM, CPRP, as well as daily inch rate. What we're doing here is to measure the target audience size against the cost of reaching that audience. You have to. You have to. You can't just spend money without giving any consideration to, whether or not you are being most efficient. What is the cost to reach? So cost per thousand, or those are questions that you really have to consider, right? And again, here are the calculations for each of those terms: CPM, cost per thousand, targeted cost per thousand, cost per ratings point, and the daily inch rate. And of course, as you can imagine, daily inch rate is for newspapers. Now, as we would have said, we are in the accountability era of marketing. And so, just like marketing plans are driven by accountability, media plans are also driven by accountability. Um, we have so much money at stake. Um, Clients are going to want hard data showing what their budgets are being spent on and that it's being well spent. But it's the same thing if you're on the corporate side, it's even worse. Your CFOs and your CEOs and your CMOs, all those persons are going to want to know that their funds are being well spent. Um, so things that you want to consider when you are doing your evaluation and follow-up phase is how effective were those strategies in achieving your stated objectives. And you want to also consider the media plan's contribution in attaining the overall marketing and communication objectives. So you want to make sure that, and one of the things that I say to students, when you are putting a media plan together, you have to match the measurement to the medium. So you have to make sure that the criteria, the metrics, the numbers that you are utilizing, the figures that you're utilizing to say, you know, that something was effective is matched to the medium that you are using. So, for example, um, if you are speaking in digital terms, for example, social media, etc., you're going to find that your CPM and your TCPM are good. Your gross impressions and so on, because you have to be utilizing the measurements that are appropriate. You cannot say, for example, and I'm not saying that it's right, so let's do that. You can't say, for example, that in order to evaluate the effectiveness of the social media portion of the campaign, you're going to conduct a survey. I'm not saying that a survey cannot be used, and but is it the most optimal when the truth is the metrics and statistics that are available that can tell you, for example, like we said, your gross impressions, your cost per thousand impressions. Um, you can look at your conversion rate and so on. You want to make sure that when you are, you know, you are laying out how you're going to measure what success looks like, right? You are making sure that the criteria that you're going to use to say this is what success looks like for this campaign matches with what you are using, the media that you're using. Okay, of course, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have about this particular lecture during our live session.